I'll turn things over now to Amro. Amro, welcome.
Hi, good morning and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Amr, and I want to start sharing my screen.
I got your breakfast ready.
Okay. So, good afternoon. My name is Amr. We started this initiative out of my own need with my kids to provide them with stories that are interesting for them to read and to get into becoming more curious and build that love for reading. And bit by bit, I started noticing the need from people around me. When I started doing this, I was doing it on scraps of paper and giving it to other parents that I know to like share these stories. And then we went into the web, and then it turned into an app, and bit by bit, month by month, day by day, the team kept growing, and the amount of content that we're producing kept growing. And now, nearly 4 years into the journey, we have hundreds of people working on this project, from authors to illustrators to editors to actors and studio engineers. Everybody is working on this, is very passionate about it, and is allowing us to deliver this awesome content to the largest segment of people. So when we started, we wanted to create something different, because my own need as a parent started from not being able to find content that gave the kids a positive outlook on life. It was either very preachy and direct, be a good boy, listen to your mom and dad, which is something that kids are not interested in reading about. They're always hearing about that from their parents. So we thought that it's a good idea to give them something fresh that explained how the world around them works, that helps them understand their own feelings, how to deal with them. So we worked on emotional intelligence and STEM as very critical items to tackle, plus basic concepts and things that we think needs to be in the knowledge base of the kids. So we wanted also, as we started working on this, we found out that lots of parents are picking it up, but also teachers, which helped us change our focus a bit when we started getting feedback from teachers who were using it at school. And we thought that we have a good starting point there to build the habit of reading. So we built a simple platform, a minimum viable product. We gave it to schools. We worked with them for a year, just getting feedback from them and seeing how it can be more and more useful for them. And today, nearly 250,000 students are using the platform on a monthly basis to read, to do their reading assignments, and teachers, I think now we are in the tens of thousands of teachers who are using it to follow up on the students' assignments. Doing this also allowed us to start a business model that can fund content creation and at the same time reduce the cost of creating content. So one of the challenges in the Arab world is that, so I'll cycle through the slides and go back. So one of the challenges of the content in the Arab world is that although there is 350 million people speaking Arabic in the Arab world, they're dispersed over a large piece of land and in 22 different countries with different borders, different policies, all of these things. So getting physical books to these people is a very big challenge and is costly. And most of the distributors are actually regional distributors, and they have very limited reach. So to cover an area as small as a city like, let's say, like Dubai or Amman, you need maybe 20 or 30 distributors that you need to deal with as a publishing house. Plus, they were taking very steep percentages, which didn't allow the publishing industry to thrive, especially for the children literature. So we decided to eliminate the middleman. And then we had the second problem. We started having more funding to create more stories, but we didn't find enough good authors. So with the funding that came from the Gdl NLG Ethic Prize, we were actually able to put some of that funding to train these authors and create really good authors. We got a very talented trainer who is a Syrian lady who got her education in children literature from UC Berkeley. And we worked with her to create a syllabus for the authors to teach them the right way, or to do it in a systematic way to create great content. So that allowed us to solve another problem in the, or another challenge in the equation. And then once we went digital first, it reduced all of the cost of having to deal with distributors, reduced the cost of having to have print content. And then we started focusing on how to make it easy to deliver to different places around the world. So to sum it up where we are today, we are a platform that is used by 250,000 readers monthly. We have around 3 million stories read each month. The kids are spending 250,000 hours, which is nearly 20 years worth of reading just in the past 30 days. This is the amount of time they spent reading on the platform. And it's used formally in 170 schools in 7 countries. And we have the open library that is used also by by kids from over 130 countries. We don't only work with creating content for kids. We also create educational content for teachers on how, teaching strategies, how to do literacy education the right way. We deal also with parents on positive parenting, and we do this through social media, and we have a very active page with nearly we are pushing towards 1 million before the end of this year of followers engaged with the content that we produce. Sorry. So our goal is to inspire the next generation of readers from every region who can dream of what their story will one day be. Right now, I'd like to show you a title from the app, just to give you an idea of the kind of stories that we're creating for the kids. And I can show you also a bit of the tool that we use to streamline the production of content. So as you can see here, we have a long list of titles. This is our pipeline. And it's like a collaborative tool that the illustrators, the authors, the editors in our team, the studio, that records the voiceover for the stories, uses to create the finished product. And then also through this tool, we publish it to the app, to the website, and it's nearly automated in lots of aspects, which reduces the time that you need to publish these stories in a very standard, easy to use format. So one of the titles that we've done with the project, which I think is interesting, is called The Diaries of a Martian Kid. So the beauty of this book is, so each book has a very unique story behind it, whether like the kind of illustration we use doing it, or the way it was written, or the topic is tackling. But this is just an example that I found interesting because it's a multi-layer story that kids in different ages can enjoy. So it talks about a kid from Mars who is writing his diaries, and he just turned 5. So he starts by talking about himself, and while talking, The kids will learn during the story about counting, which we'll see how he'll do it in a very smart way. They learn about the senses, so like eyesight and smelling and touching and all of these things, and tasting. And for the older audience, you will learn about the planet Mars and about the differences between Mars and Earth. And the way it's done.
I'm sorry if I could just interrupt you for a moment. If you could stop sharing the presentation, we'll be able to see the.
You're only seeing the presentation.
Right. We're still looking at the screen. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for letting me know. Just a second. Okay. I hope you can see now the story from the platform. So I was showing the pipeline. You're actually looking at the presentation, huh? Okay.
No worries. We see the book now, and you can always take us back to the pipeline if you'd like to.
Yeah, once we finish the book, maybe. So yeah, so this is the book, the Diaries of a Martian Kid. And as we say, it takes a layered approach. We were talking about the how the story talks about the numbers, the senses, and at the same time, for the older audience, they'll still enjoy learning about Mars and the differences between Mars and Earth. And the way it was created, because it's also audible, so they can listen to it. So kids, very young kids, can enjoy the illustrations, learn about the senses, about the numbers, and they don't have to comprehend the higher level stuff about the differences between Mars and Earth. But the older audience will also enjoy that and find the some comedy even in the way the issues are explained and the differences between Earth and Mars. So, and also you learn about colors. So this is a very rich story. Like this is a totally layered story with very different elements that the kid can learn about. And they're all put in a nice way. So it starts with the birthday of the child, as we said, like he's writing his diaries, he just turned 5. And then his family comes to visit. So they, so as you can see, each member of his family is of a different color. So the kid is learning about colors. Plus he's saying that he's nearly, the kids on Earth are, he's pitying the kids on Earth because they're nearly half the size he's in, because the year on Earth is only half the year on Mars. Which is also something that you were learning about, the differences between Mars and Earth. And then you can see also the different family members in different colors. They're bringing him gifts. And now each day he'll unwrap a gift, and it will be a body part that will allow him to have a new sense. So he starts with one nose, and he talks about how Earth has oxygen while Mars doesn't. And then he gets ears, 2 ears. Now we're learning about counting, senses, Mars. It's a very rich, layered story. And then he talks about touching and having these forearms. And now 3 eyes. And there is some use of kind of nonsensical words that are very helpful in learning to read, and at the same time very playful for the older audience. So the names of the days in his diary are, instead of saying, let's say Friday, it says Mar Friday, like it's a Mars Friday, right? In Arabic it translates in a very nice and funny way. I don't know if it translates just as well in English. So yeah, that's just one example of a story where you can learn about the senses, counting, planets, in a very fun, simple way. So that's it for this story. I'll show you the pipeline, which we missed in the first time. So here is the pipeline where everybody collaborates, and you can see a lot of info there. but everyone knows what they're looking at. So like teachers know when they're creating educational material related to the stories, the authors know, the editors know, they keep notes, all the notes are on the system. So you can see like if there are mistakes, where are they? And then the correction. And once they're corrected, you can see the fixed issues. And you have different levels of editing. So we have for the text itself, for the audio that is read also. And this is a very crucial part in creating content in Arabic. One of the challenges in content in Arabic is that the quality of the editing is not up to the expectations of, let's say, being used in schools. So if you go to the bookshop and you buy books, most of these books wouldn't be having the full diacritics, even when it's for a certain age that needs these diacritics to be able to read. Many of them would have even wrong diacritics or diacritics in the wrong places, which also is a bit challenging for teachers to be able to use these scripts in school. So doing this and having the platform allows us to actually improve the quality of the content, reduce the cost of the content, make it practically usable in schools. In addition to that, even in private schools, because today you can see that maintaining a rich library is a big challenge for schools, especially in early years, whether it's maintaining a large number of copies in the same school or the tear and wear that happens especially in early years, and like books lost and all of that. So having the content in digital, being able to track the reading that happens on it, is very interesting for the schools, because then they can monitor how well reading is going within the school premises. So that's it mainly. I'll get back to you, Erin.
Hi there. Okay, thank you, Amro. If you can stop your screen, I will share mine here. Thank you so much for that. I just want to remind everyone to please go ahead and put any questions that you have into the chat box there, and we're going to be rounding them up and having a Q&A session at the very end, the last 15 minutes or so. So please, any questions that you have, just shoot them to us there, and we'll circle back to them. All right. Thank you for that, Amro. So our next presenter is Krister Gundersen. He is a technology enthusiast and the Chief Technology Officer for the Global Digital Library. As you will come to realize, Krister has a strong commitment to the use of free software and open educational learning resources. He's previously held positions with the Norwegian government, Microsoft, and the Norwegian Competence Center for Free Software. Krister, welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Erin. I will share my screen. All right. I want to thank everyone for joining, and thank Amro for this great introduction to the project. What I'll do now is I'll give you a short introduction to the Gdl project, and then I'll show how the resources from All Children Reading and Amro and his project came into the Gdl, and how they have been reused in different ways. And I'll also give a demonstration on how you can access the resources, but also a brief introduction on how you can get started on translations. So first of all, the Global Digital Library, we are a project that focuses on increasing the availability of high-quality early grade reading resources. Our focus has been, until now, early grade reading as pure reading resources, but we're getting more and more content also touching in on different topics like STEM. And the resources from this competition is one of those content portfolios where we actually add different other topics to the early grade reading perspective. We are a bit different than many of the other projects. We are not producing content at all ourselves. So we are collecting existing resources, screening them for quality, and then publishing them on our platform so it can be accessed both for print, web, and of course mobile. And I think this screening process has been important for us because we have, I'm guessing we have received maybe 10 to 12,000 resources, and only 3,000 of them have so far been put on our platform. But we're constantly screening new languages and going live. The quality assurance bit has been important for us, and so we have a large sort of backlog of content that hasn't gone on because of those quality assurance principles. We are a part of the Global Book Alliance, which means we are a part of a sort of a larger collaboration with a bunch of other great organizations. UNICEF, UNESCO, of course, USAID, that has been really an important partner for us. All Children Reading, in this case, providing content, and the World Bank doing 2 different studies with our content in Africa. So they all play different roles, but they are all part of our collaborative group of members of the Global Book Alliance. I also want to emphasize that there's a bunch of partners providing content here. So that's African Storybook, Book Dash, Enabling Writers, Storyweaver, of course, and a bunch of projects from that is funded by the American government. So all these projects actually provide content that we put on our platform for our users. We are mobile first, so you'll find if you test the platform that it is even better on mobile than it is on your computer. And all the content on the platform so far is labeled with or released under a Creative Commons license, which means you can reuse it and adapt it if you choose to do so. There's sort of a different shift that you might want to observe when we look at the resources from Amro and his team. That is, some of the resources are labeled with non-commercial and some are not. So 90% of the resources, you can actually profit from them, but some of them, like the ones from Amro and his team, are labeled with non-commercial, which means you can reuse them only if you're not creating any profit. But still reusable and adaptable. That's a really, really important part of the sharing dynamic of our project. I just want to mention briefly that we are a content hub, so we're actually working actively with partners that want to use our content in bulk. I'll get back to an example of that, but we have what's called APIs and we have what's called an OPDS feed, which allow others to create new projects with our content. And we are actively promoting this as an option for partners that we have. We went live exactly a year ago, plus 4 days. 4 days, so we're just 1 year. We are looking at 41 languages by the end of this year. We're just this week actually working on 10 new languages from African Storybook, also with STEM topics that we're going to launch next week. And we're doing a big launch in Asia in November that will put us somewhere between 40 and 50 languages. But as a moderate estimate, we'll have 41 by the end of the year. Our goal is to ramp this up and have 100 or more languages by the end of next year. This is an important part of the reason why we're having this seminar. It's a very important feature for many of the smaller languages. We allow any user to go onto the platform, pick a book in English, and then translate into their language. Our list so far has, I think, 320 languages right now that you can choose to translate into. And I'll demo this quickly as I end this presentation. But this has really been important also for these titles, as they've been translated into many, many new languages. This is the platform, and you can see one of the titles on top here, Grace in Space. She is a lovely girl that has been headlining many of our talks this year. And it's fairly easy. You go onto the platform and you look for a book, and you walk through the book like if it was a physical book. And we've tested this in 7 countries, both in Asia and Africa. So the user interface here has been thoroughly tested on different devices and on users that are not tech savvy at all. We're not, of course, every time sure if the data that we receive is correctly, but we have at least 10 to 15 users that we have tested with that are really, really new to the smartphone element, and they claim not to have seen smartphones at all, and still they're able to both navigate and read after a very short while on the platform. This is the first translation. I'll come back to this. But if you see first, if I go back, this is the English version. This is the, sorry about that. And this is the Zulu version. So this is the English version. This is the Zulu version. And as you can see, there's heavy on illustration. Illustration is important for the book itself. And the text is fairly short. So translating a title like this will take approximately 1 hour if you're fluent in 2 languages. So the efficiency here in terms of the type of content really creates that opportunity for translation. Key elements here, and the key elements also in terms of how the content from Asafeer has been shared already, is that it is released under a free license, which means it's allowed to translate it, and you can also change it if you want. And for many of the titles that have not been, and this is not an element relevant for the Asafeer titles, but for a bunch of the others, you can actually also profit from them. And these 2 elements, you can change it, you can share it, and you can reuse it. And this is the important elements if you translate. And for some of the titles, as I mentioned, you can actually profit. And this is something that many are not aware of, that you can actually print books and actually sell them afterwards. So back to the Asafeer titles. They came, so Grace came to us with a bunch of other great characters in November 2018. We launched with Arab titles and English titles. Over the first few weeks, we had translations into French, Spanish, and Zulu, straight off the bat. And they came partly based on commercial translations that we can actually organize on our platform, and partly on community translations that was approved. After that, we've had over 300 community translations to more than 40 languages, only based on this collection alone. And this is just over the first 6 months. And of course, there is no extra funding. This is organizations all around the world looking at the book, finding it useful for their kids, taking the book and then translating it into a new language. It's important to emphasize that these 42 languages are not visible for those not part of that group because they have not been quality assured. But if you are a teacher in Addis Ababa, or you're a teacher in Uganda, you can translate this and you can use it as soon as you finish the translations. Food for the Hungry is the most active organization, and they have alone translated more than 450 books. And of these 300, they have translated a large number. So this is really, sharing magic in the making. And it's still, of course, ongoing. We're only 6 months out. Just after Christmas, I got an email from a friend of mine who runs this project called Learning Equality. That's the organization. The platform is called Colibri. And as you see in the middle here, there's a global digital library. And they actually programmatically reused the whole collection of Arab and English titles. And this is an offline platform that has been used in a number of countries all around the world. Many of you probably already know the Learning Equality team. But they could go on and download those resources without any agreements, without any questions asked. And it took them really, they claim it took about 2 to 3 days to do that reuse. Another exciting reuse is actually Asia Foundation that just over into the new year contacted us and told us that they had reused Grace in Space, of course, and a number of other titles on their platform. And they've actually also made some changes to a couple of the stories to tailor their users in a good manner. So all these elements just shows that by releasing them under a free license, we can actually grow as a community and we can have reuse across borders and across languages. We are now actually working to take some of these titles and creating interactive tests and small games that would be sort of the after reading exercise. When you've read the book, you can be tested as a child if you comprehend the core element. This has not been set into production yet, but these great titles have given us the opportunities to start working on content and creating interactive elements as part of the books. Again, these changes are fully in line with the license. The coolest thing, probably not the most useful one, but the coolest thing is that you can now go to Google Assistant and say, "Hi Google, can I talk to the GDL library?" And you have to say, I have to mention this, you have to say GDL library. So if you have an Android phone like this, you can actually now go on Google Assistant and access these titles. So you can, for instance, say, after you've started talking to the GDL, you can say, show me books on level 1. And it will list out all the books, and you can ask Google Assistant to read Grace in Space for you, and Google Assistant will actually read the books and show you the pages as you go. One funny bit is if you say goodbye GDL at the end, it'll give you a polite goodbye message as you go. This is not something that we think is going to be super relevant this year, but natural language processing is a field that is growing immensely. But based on the platform agnostic approach that we have had, connecting these titles to Google and the Google Assistant has been fairly straightforward. It's not a large operation at all. And it's a good experiment to see how we can change some of the reading dynamics on new platforms like this. I am now going to just demo the platform. Please give me a heads up if I'm not portraying it correctly. Can everyone see? Everyone nodding, that's good. So this is the platform, the Global Digital Library. And as you can see here, we have language that you can choose on the top. Right now, we have 23. We'll have 30 by the end of next week, and as I mentioned, 40 by the end of the year. Grace in Space is one of the titles. As you can see down here, we have levels from 1 to 4. And we have something we call read alouds. We just launched a new category called games. So for those of you who know the Era Prosuria competition, that also is something that All Children Reading has been involved in, the game Feed the Monster has been portrayed. If you go to Arabic here, you'll find the titles, just see here. Some of the same titles, but of course then in another language. And at the bottom here, you'll find that the games are both of the winners of the competition for Area Prosuria. I'll actually go back to the English one because I'm better at English than Arabic. All right. Here, if you go to levels, again, you can find your titles. I'm actually going to just open Grace in Space. As you can see, Grace in Space is on level 2. We've just re-leveled these titles. So be aware of this if you try to look at them. There might be a cache you have to wait on. You can now read the book, of course, as I showed earlier. And you toggle page by page. I have to say, still looking at this book for the 100th time, these illustrations, Amro, they're great. And I have to say, I was when I saw this book for the first time as sort of a preview, I was just heading for a conference in South Africa last year, and I stood on the podium and I said, in a couple of years, I think children in Norway will start reading books created in Africa and the Middle East. And the guys in the room, a bunch of people from USAID, they were friendly, but they laughed at me and said, you know, it's not going to happen anytime soon. But we have already seen these books being used in our country. So it's, and this is because of the quality of the illustrations, no doubt about that. So that was just a quick view of the platform. You enter the platform, you find your language, and you find your book of choice. But if I were to say that this book looks really nice, I can read it, but I can also translate it. And just to show you quickly, if you hit translate, you'll be asked to log on. I will log on. And in this case here, the 300 languages come into play. So I'll have English on the left side. I'll have a bunch of languages on the right side. I'll go for Norwegian, as that is my flavor of choice. And then you have English, Norwegian, prepare translation. And when I start translation here, I can go mobile or I can translate in context. For a couple of languages like Amharic, many of the students that we've had, they prefer mobile, but I'm going to go into context, as it's called. And as I go into context, I see the book and can navigate through the book. It's going to do like that. So, and I can look at the different pages. And whenever I want to do so, I can start translating by hitting this button over here. I go into translation mode. On the top, I have my original text. In the middle, my working space. And down here, I get some sort of help sometimes. So grace in space, I can ask the system to give me some input. Norwegian, grace på tur I rommet. I'll just change that because the programmatical one wasn't that good. In this case, I'm in English on top, Norwegian in the middle. I'll hit save. Same goes here. I'll ask Microsoft Translator just to give me help to start out. And as usual, this is not correct, so I'll do human translation, of course, of this. And just for the demo sake, just remove one word. And voila, this page here has actually been translated. You can see the top here with the title and the extended version here. If I go, say I go here, I can do this one because it's fairly short. I can get some help from Google Translate. Now I will correct it, and I hit save. I'll do again a bit help from Translate. That is actually correct. I'll hit save. I go back here, and voila, the page is translated into Norwegian. And this speed, of course, is only for demo. I would advise you to take a bit more time for each page when you translate, but still, this is an 18-page book. You will finish it normally with between 1 and 1.5 hours if you're thorough. And when I close this book, I get into my working space on the Gdl. And this was just to show you that from you start until you're on the way to translating, it's going to take you a very, very, very short time. Here is Grace in Space, and you can see that I can find my then ongoing translations here, and I can sync it as I come into this mode. And I can also start translating again here if I'm not finished with the book as I am now. And as you see, when I synced it here, it went from Grace in Space to the Norwegian title Grace ute I rommet, which is the Norwegian translation. This is truly something that we think might change the dynamics, especially for the smaller languages, where there are no budgets, there is no market for sort of building collection from the ground. Smaller languages basing their translations on these high-quality titles and then sharing it amongst teachers, students, and of course parents. Anyone can go in here. to translate. So that was a very short introduction to the platform and a very, very short introduction to the translation features. If you are curious about translation, go to home.digitallibrary.io and what's called Translate. Here you will get a short video introduction and a step-by-step guide that will give you a good, steady introduction to become a super translator on the platform of Gdl. So I don't know exactly what my time is, Erin, but I'm through.
That's great. Actually, you did us a favor. I think we have 3 minutes, and I thought before we start the Q&A session, and again, I would encourage anyone to just drop your questions into the chat. If you could take us through just one more book. We were hoping we'd have time to do that. Speaking of beautiful illustrations and very rich STEM content, I think we could maybe share another brief one, and then we'll turn it over to the Q&A session.
Yes, definitely. Just a second. Okay, so Krister, can you stop sharing the screen?
Yes.
Okay, good, great. Thank you. So this is another example of a story. Now, the stories that we did for this project, we wanted to spark the interest of the kids with the story and how it relates to, let's say, to their life or things they can see or go through. And then after we spark their interest, we'll give them also some extended knowledge about the scientific aspect of the story. So we created these info cards where it tells them more about the scientific part of the story and maybe gives them more information or gets them more interested into the story. So this is a very simple story. It talks about like a girl talking about how nice words would make her face glow. And then she uses all of these scientific examples of things that glow. It starts from how the moon reflects the light from the sun, and then how the stars sparkle at night, from the thunder, the light from the thunder, and then the, what do you call it, light bugs or fireflies, and some sort of a shell or some sea, I don't know, crustacean that glows, and also some sort of glowing worms that live in caves. And then it tells you about some deep water creatures that glow. And then it explains about all of these phenomena with more information. So this is like the info card part of the book. And with many of these books where we thought that we can give more information about the scientific aspect, we just suffix the book with a small page or two that gives you more information about the STEM part of the content. So that's it, mainly. Can I answer the first question, one of the questions that I saw about the language? So for Arabic, we use Fusha, which is the formal Arabic, but when you're working on children literature, the focus is on something called the Common Elevated Language, or what we call the White Arabic, which is very simple. It's close to the spoken language. It's closer to the spoken language, but still it's Fusha. So you still maintain the rules and the grammar of the formal Arabic, but at the same time you use the vocabulary that is closely used in everyday life, rather than which is the actual form of Fusha, which is more like Shakespearean English, right? So publishers today, they understand that this doesn't work with kids, and everybody is going towards the White Arabic, or the Common Elevated Language, which is a form of Fusha that is simplified and that is closer to the spoken everyday language. Now I'll turn it back to you, Erin. I,
Michelle, how are our questions coming along? Do we have a few there that we should start with now? We've answered.
Yeah, we have a
about the
couple
language.
here. Maybe Amro, while we're with you, if you, one of the questions that came in was asking is if your production tool and app is available in the public domain for use in other languages. Could you speak to that?
To tell the truth, we haven't thought about sharing it because we built it bit by bit according to our needs. But the more we get people involved, the more we found out the value of it. So we did it to make our work faster. And now we can see that there should be value for it and for other people. So if somebody is interested, maybe we can start to talk on how to make it more generic so anybody else would be able to use it. Yeah, we're open to help on that aspect. But it's not readily available right now.
Okay. And then for Krister, is there somewhere to see what the features of each level are? Maybe if you could either show that or clarify that. And then also, can you change the level when you translate or reversion the book? Perhaps when it's done in a different language, it changes the difficulty level, and is there a way to adjust for that?
So yes, actually, this is something we just got some through the process that we've had now with a bunch of translations, many hundred translations. Releveling has been one of the issues popping up, so we're working on that. But as of now, you cannot relevel for the new language. Actually, it's not very far out, or it's not too far into the future before that is possible. We see that, especially between some of the languages, releveling would be natural. We've actually, as we started out with the library resources, we point to two different projects that we sort of try to harmonize the levels between, and that is Storyweaver and African Storybook. I can post our quality assurance elements or quality assurance standards in the comments below afterwards, and anyone can go in and look at how the leveling has been chosen. For the classroom category, we align to levels in each country. So those are government approved, and they align to then the country's levels. But for the library categories, we see the need to relevel as we change languages. But as of now, you cannot do that.
And speaking to that quality assurance question you just started with there, another question is, once a book is translated and contextualized for a different culture by chance, what do you do with the new version? You mentioned that it kind of stays in your private collection for a while because it hasn't been quality assured yet, but then maybe if you could talk about the process of getting that translation available globally in the Global Digital Library and what that process is.
Yeah. So first of all, we have two ways of getting content. The one is importing. So we're doing that now. So we just this week programmatically import about 2,000 titles into our test platform, and we're starting to screen those. The first 100 that comes out of that process would be the ones that I mentioned from South Africa. So we have a fairly streamlined process of importing resources. The translations is of course differently, where you actually can translate for your own use. And actually, if you have the link to that, so you can, when you're finished, you can share that link with anyone on social media or on email. So everyone that has that link in your community can use that book. It's only not available. It's just not available on the global search and visible on the platform. For the general user, if you just translated one or two books, it's not very likely in that language that we will try to use resources to get it approved. But if you're doing a larger number, like in a group, we will try to find a third party that quality assures that language, approves it or approves each book for each page. And then when it's approved, we'll publish it on the platform. And then that again is a very streamlined process. We've done that with some of the titles. We're working on that from some of the titles from the translation event last November. But As of now, we've been overwhelmed by the number of resources. So we have a backlog of original content that has been prioritized before community translations. But the process after you have translated is quality assurance based on the exact same criteria as if they were imported. And when they're been quality assured by a third party, we'll go and put them on our main platform.
Can I highlight something that I think is very important when talking about content creation that maybe we didn't talk about? For anybody who's planning to venture on a content creation project, one of the things that we found very useful, whether you're part of an NGO or a content creation company, is making sure that the partners are very flexible. We had a great partner with World Vision and the whole team that worked with us. The thing is, when we started, the requirements of the project were something different. And because we both wanted to reach a goal where we create the most value, we were able to create this content. So having a very flexible partner who understands having that trust, building that trust is very important to create that great content. I think the targets for number of illustrations were much lower than what we were able to achieve, and it wouldn't be possible without the flexibility of the people who worked with us and the creative thinking that got into this. So I think that is a very important aspect when you start a project. Is even when you start with a certain set of requirements, sometimes, especially when it comes to content creation, being flexible and thinking about the best way to create more value is very important. The second aspect that we also learned from this is translation is no easy task, and it shouldn't be added to a project as an afterthought. It's something that needs a lot of work, a lot of thinking and planning to do it properly, so it has the proper impact that it should have, and then nothing gets lost in translation, but actually a beautiful adaptation in a different language is there. That's all I wanted to share, that I thought are very important lessons from what we learned when we did this project.
That's great, thank you. One more question for you, Krister. One of our participants has noted, maybe if you could give a little, another demonstration. They noted that in some of these books, the Arabic text is kind of integrated or maybe on top of some of the illustrations. Can you clarify how that works when, like separating the text from the illustration when they're trying to do a new translation for the book?
Yeah. So first of all, as you can see here on the slide that is up and going now, you'll see text on top of the illustration. In some of the title covers, we won't be able to remove it. You also see some English text, for instance, on the books from Book Dash. But for the reading part of the book, we'll extract the text, which in the original book was actually placed over the book. We'll extract the text and separate the illustration from the text below. This is because we're aiming for what we call platform agnostic reading, which means if you're placing the text on a very certain point in the illustration, it will actually not do the job, as you're looking to sort of scale it in terms of smaller phones, larger tablets, and so forth. But in some cases when you have, and we're only doing translations from English to other languages, but in some cases you'll actually have English text in one cover picture, but all the content in the book would be translatable. And of course, and back to what is important when you create content, mixing letters in pictures, it seems like a very good idea when you're doing a print book. It's not a very good idea if you want to do a digital book for multiple platforms. So we, of course, are encouraging our content providers not to do this, but we're also respecting that in some cases there will be letters within the pictures. But I think for the titles coming from Amro and his crew, this might be the case for some of the cover photos, but inside the book, all the text will be separated from the illustrations as you walk through them. So in that case, when you start reading, you will not have sort of two languages in the same book. But you're asking a very important question, and for us, when we talk to our partners, we're trying to get them to completely separate those two elements.
So, Krister, if I might interject, if you need the covers without the Arabic text, we already have them readily available. So just let us know. We'll
and we
send
have problem
them.
solving here as we go.
Yeah, yeah.
That is good.
Mm-hmm.
Krister, one other question. When you were showing the translation tool, there were two options, translate in context versus mobile. Could you just explain those two options?
Yeah. So the first one, in context, is something that we've done over the last 3 months. I think we launched it in February, and trying to improving that as we go. We tested it in Habassa in Ethiopia in late February. The idea is to be in context, be in the book. So you go from page to page and you translate. That is for larger screens. But we've also seen, while we've been testing this, that in some languages, it's actually faster to translate on mobile telephones because of the typing set. So for instance, in Amharic, our first large-scale test there 1.5 years ago, we saw suddenly a couple of students taking up their phones instead of the computers. And as we started talking to them, we saw that because of the keyboard issues with Amharic, it was faster for them to translate on phones. So if you go to the option of translating with your phone, it'd be a bit more complex structure with a file structure that you have to walk through, but still you have the same translation features. So that is to give those an option who wants to use their phone to translate instead of a computer. The way to choose between them is the size of the screen. So a large tablet or a computer, you go to in context. If you have a small tablet or a phone, you go to mobile translation.
Okay. I know we just have 1 minute left here before we turn back to Aaron, but I think one important question, since the purpose of this webinar really for All Children Reading is we really want people to take these books and translate them. If you could just say in just a few seconds here, what process is used to make sure we attribute credit to the original author and the original artist? And then after your question, we'll go back to Aaron to close. Yeah,
so we give attribution to the originator of the content, so that is Asafeer and All Children Reading. We give attribution to, of course, the illustrator and the author. And if there are some special requirements, like in this case here, where All Children Reading wanted to have an additional text to the licensing, we also have space for that on the cover of the book. So at once when you open the book, author, and if there is an author named in the data, author, illustrator, and originator will be named. And it's up to the content provider if they name their authors. So in a couple of projects from USAID, they have chosen not to name the author, but if there are authors and illustrators, we will separate them and we will prominently display them with the content.
Okay. Well, thank you all so much for attending and for all the questions that were asked. I think we could continue on for a few more hours probably, but I thank you for your interest in joining us today. Just want to remind everyone that this webinar is being recorded. It will be available with closed captioning on our website at allchildren.org in the next few days. Be sure to follow us on Facebook or on Twitter. You can see all of our calls to action there. So we hope you'll join us for the next webinar that we'll hold in the near future. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.